I'm Edie Lush, and I'm here in Paris at the Hub Culture Pavilion for COP21. Delighted to be joined by Chris Lincoln-Jones. Thank you very much for coming.
A pleasure, Edie.
Director of Eyestar Consulting and former military officer.
I am.
Tell me about semi-autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, a very good way of putting it rather than drone, which I don't like too much. Remotely piloted aircraft, semi-autonomous vehicle, implying that there is a man in the loop, which the word drone tends to do, by mankind.
Okay.
Mankind in the loop.
So we're in Paris for the climate summit. What are the areas, I know that they've come from the military, but what are the areas that we're seeing them used most effectively in civilian life?
I think the most exciting area with a view to climate is in agriculture, where one can reduce the impact on the environment by using different sensors on a little air vehicle, and you see these quadcopters quite a lot now, and they are using infrared, ultraviolet sensors to look at a crop, and they can see where pests are getting at it or it's diseased, and rather than using a huge amount of chemical on the whole area, you can actually target where disease or infertility is, which reduces cost and burden on the environment.
And I know that they're quite good at looking down long lines. Now, why is that?
The sensors, when they're used for surveillance, for looking at things like that, have quite a narrow field of view. So we would call it a bit like looking down a straw. And so a railway line is very good. You can check that.
Oil pipelines.
And anything like that, that you might, an oil pipeline, for example, you can check for leaks. They are being used at the moment to do much cheaper high-definition surveys of the surface of an aircraft, for example. Rather than put very expensive scaffolding around an aircraft, you fly the little aircraft around it, and you can see if there are cracks or anything like that. So there's a real multitude of civilian uses starting to come into play.
And what about in areas like fires or disasters like Fukushima? How could we see semi-autonomous vehicles being used better in the future?
There's no man in the aircraft, nor even a woman in the aircraft. And so they can go into dangerous areas without risking a person. Dirty, dull and dangerous is what we say that unmanned air systems are very good for. So take Fukushima, because you can use different sensors on it, again into particularly infrared. If you could have got one in early in that disaster, you could have made an assessment of what was going on earlier and therefore dealt with the system before it got further and further out of control. And in a fire, you can see where the seat of the fire is because they can look through smoke.
Okay. If we go back to the military and look into the future, what makes you worried about the development of these vehicles?
Some of the discussion at the moment about the ethical considerations of their use is around what are developing into lethal autonomous weapon systems. Western governments are looking at it and looking at the legality, and that truly is where a robot might be given the decision as to whether to cause harm to a human being, and then you could actually call it a drone. And I think that is the dangerous thing for the future, is a machine that can make a decision as to whether it should kill someone, and if that decision is intelligent enough, they may be making a decision as to whether we're the problem in the first place.
And on that cheery note, we're going to leave it there, Chris. Thank you very much for coming into the Hub Culture Pavilion here in Paris, and I'm Edie Lush.